First off, just want to thank everyone for attending the happy hour today. I'm really grateful to be able to connect with everyone despite working from home and kind of the stresses we're under. So it's great that we've all come together today. So thank you. I also want to give a shout out to all of our staff that's on the call. So I'm Nicole Padron. I'm the Stewardship Director of Rivers and Lands Conservancy. We also have Rachel Hamilton. She's the Community Engagement, I'm saying that wrong. Community Engagement Specialist, it's not that anymore, is it? Community Outreach.
It's Outreach Coordinator. The title's gone back and forth multiple times.
I apologize, Rachel. Outreach Coordinator. I knew I was going to butcher that. We have Rebecca O'Connor, our Development Director. We have Jack Easton, our Executive Director. We've got Dennis Charbonneau, Land Steward. And I think that's all we have on staff right now. I'd also like to give a shout out to some of our volunteers that have been actually to some of these acorn planting events that we've done. So I believe Anais might be online, Astrid, and also want to thank some of our partners that are on the line. So we have Mandy Parks, who's the district manager at IERCD. So thanks, Mandy. And Sherry Tyndall, that's educator at IERCD, the Inland Empire Resource Conservation District. And that Resource Conservation District is a fantastic partner of Rivers and Lands Conservancy, and they've helped us carry out a lot of our programs for oak restoration on the Cienega Canyon Preserve, as well as other programs. So we're very thankful. And looks like we have a few more popping in right now. So I also want to say hi to my family. I have a ton of family on the call. So family from Colorado and Utah. And so that's really fun too. My parents are on the call. So, despite kind of being disconnected, I find in some ways we are more connected using our technology nowadays, so that's great. All right, but we're so glad that everyone's here for our happy hour, hopefully some new faces. We also hope that once it's safe to do so, that you guys can all come out and join us for one of our events. We'd love to have your help out planting acorns or collecting acorns or watering acorns. So we hope that you can join us for a volunteer event in the future as well. And feel free to ask questions in the chat box as they come up during the presentation. We will, if it makes sense, we'll answer them during the presentation, but we'll also have time at the end to go over questions, so it won't be your only opportunity. And once we start the presentation, actually I think Rachel maybe already did so, we'll be muting folks, so you can always use the chat function to ask questions, and then I think maybe at the end we'll be unmuting again. Rach, okay, so that's kind of just the logistics there. Oh, and we also have Michelle McKinney. She's our board president who's joined us, and thanks, Rach. That's okay. I was wondering why Jack was giving me the rabbit ears. I was like, oh, can't hear me. Okay. So I think everyone can hear me now. I'm gonna also want to give a shout out to Wicks Brewing in Riverside. They are our happy hour sponsors, and you can get discounted beer if you use the link that Rachel put in the chat. So please support our local businesses. They've been great supporters of ours as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. Okay, you can see that, right, Rachel? Give me a nod. Fantastic. Okay, so thanks again for joining us on our happy hour today. Today we're going to be sharing about our oak restoration efforts at our Cienega Canyon Preserve. Again, my name is Nicole Padron. I'm the Stewardship Director. I've been working at the Conservancy for about 7 years now, and I have I think one of the best jobs at Rivers and Lands Conservancy as the Director of Stewardship. I work with great staff, and in my role, I oversee all of the properties that we manage, open space properties, properties that are managed for certain species, and also certain resources. And so really glad to be working at such an awesome organization. So today we're going to give an introduction about the Conservancy and the Cienega Canyon Preserve. Share why we're restoring oaks and how we're restoring oaks. And lastly, like I mentioned, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So let's jump in. So Rivers and Lands Conservancy was formed about 31 years ago in 1989 by local Riverside citizens, and we were formed under the name Riverside Land Conservancy. In our history, we've played an integral role in conserving about 14,500 acres of open space, much of which we have transferred to other entities for permanent conservation. And right now we manage about 2,600 acres of open space located in Riverside, San Bernardino, Imperial, and Orange counties. So that's one of the reasons why we changed our name. We actually work throughout Southern California. And these properties that we've conserved range in size from about a half an acre, pretty small, to over 300 acres. And there's a variety of resources that we conserve, including burrowing owl habitat. So bottom left of our screen here, we have the cute charismatic burrowing owls. We also conserve a lot of water resources. So this is along the Alessandro Arroyo in the city of Riverside, and oak woodlands. And we can't do a lot of the work that we do without the help from all of our wonderful volunteers. So here's an overview map showing the properties we manage and where they're located. And as you can see, most of them are located in western Riverside County and southwestern San Bernardino County. And our flagship property, the Cienega Canyon Preserve, is located here in purple. And it's located in the city of Calimesa in historic San Timoteo Canyon. San Timoteo Canyon was historically inhabited by the Cahuilla and was also a trade route for the Serrano Native American tribe. So here we have some photos of the Cienega Canyon Preserve. It is owned by the Conservancy. We purchased it in 2003 using a $5 million grant from the California Wildlife Conservation Board. We don't have any dedicated endowment funding to manage the property, so we rely a lot on grants, the help of volunteers, and generous donors in order to allow us to steward or take care of the property. And as you can see from these photos, the site has varied topography with rolling hills, a creek. Down here in the bottom left, you can see the creek with a riparian woodland. We also have a seasonally wet meadow, and this is how the property got its name. It's a cienega, which in Spanish I think means like bog. And we also have our wonderful oak woodland, which is about 80 acres. And so the type of oaks that we have are the coast live oaks, or Quercus agrifolia, that's the scientific name. And coast live oaks are typically found within 60 miles of the Pacific Ocean, and they're very well adapted to our Mediterranean climate of mild wet winters and hot dry summers. Some oaks, some individuals can actually live longer than 250 years. They might reach heights up to 80 feet tall, and their trunks can be as wide as 12 feet. So they're not incredibly tall trees, but they do have this beautiful large canopy. So this is an oak tree right here with this big canopy. And the canopy is basically its branches and leaves. And in this individual, the branches go all the way down to the ground. So, you know, you can kind of think about all the animals that could live within this giant oak and the shelter it provides to wildlife. Oaks typically look like this during their first 20 to 70 years of life, and then later in life, the branches are more defined and the leaves are less dense. They look more majestic. This kind of looks like, as Jack said when we went to the field to the site for the first time, it kind of looks like a meatball. They look real healthy, like a meatball. And here we have Ryan, our land steward, doing Ryan work, taking care of our oak woodland. And a little bit more about oaks. They're evergreen species, at least the coast live oaks. So they hold their leaves all year long. And these leaves are, they have these pokey margins. They've got kind of sharp teeth on the margins, and they're actually quite hard. My colleague called them nature's Legos. So if they're dry, they can be painful to step on with bare feet. But they also, you can see it's very shiny. They have this waxy layer that helps reduce water loss during our dry summers. Days like today where we're in triple digits. The roots are also they grow quite deep, up to 36 feet down into the soil to reach groundwater. And they form a relationship with mycorrhizal fungi, in which the fungi helps the oak get nutrients and water from the soil and protect the oak from diseases. And in return, the oaks provide the fungi with food, carbohydrates, essentially. And so it's an important relationship that these oaks actually need to survive. And oaks also have this beautiful thick furrowed bark, which helps shelter larger trees, at least from fire. And so what's great is if a fire goes through here, it's not going to kill most of the trees. Actually, the trees will resprout from their root crown and regrow. So they're adapted to fire as well. And then here we have the acorns, and they don't really look like that cartoon acorn you might know from the little squirrel in Ice Age that can't seem to hold on to his acorn. They're actually nice and long and skinny, so they look a little bit different from like the black oak. And so why are we restoring oaks? Well, oak woodlands are one of the most diverse ecosystems in California. So here we have some species that are in the oak woodland food web. This handsome redhead up here is an acorn woodpecker, and he or she is storing its acorns in a granary. They might store up to 20,000 acorns in a tree, or maybe you've seen them in light poles before. So they are definitely rely on oaks for food. Acorns have a ton of carbohydrates and nutrients, so they're a great food source for many birds. Down here we have the California scrub jay. The name changed recently, and they're also very smart, intelligent birds. They can hide a few thousand acorns after they can collect and hide a few thousand acorns, and they actually remember where they've hidden them, which is just crazy because I can't remember where I put my keys yesterday, let alone thousands of acorns, but they do. And they're not perfect. Sometimes they forget, actually, and guess what? Guess what could happen? Anyone know? I know I'm not really asking, it's just rhetorical. But yes, Rebecca mimed growing a tree. So then trees will grow. So they actually help spread acorns and help grow new trees. And of course, our herbivores are eaten by our carnivores. So, coyote, there's also, pumas, mountain lion, I can't think of the name right now. And so these two photos were actually taken on the preserve. The Inland Empire Resource Conservation District has a couple of wildlife cameras. So the preserve is definitely home to lots of cool animals. And what's neat about oak trees is in a single tree can produce thousands of acorns. I think something like 20,000 acorns in a single year. So they're an incredible food source. They don't always produce 20,000 acorns a year. Some years they don't produce many, but they do produce a ton of food. And of course, you know, all those beautiful branches, lots of birds like to live in there. And so they provide homes for tons of insects, mammals, and birds. So they're just a wonderful, important part of our ecosystem. And in addition to providing food and habitat for many animals, oaks also provide important benefits to humans. These so-called ecosystem services. So oaks can help improve the air that we breathe. They can sequester carbon, so they take in carbon dioxide through their leaves, and then as they grow, they incorporate that into their trunks and stems and leaves, trapping greenhouse gases to help reduce global warming. They help keep our waterways clean by reducing runoff, soil erosion, and flooding. They can actually help clean the air too, removing pollutants like carbon monoxide and ozone. And those of us that live in the area in San Bernardino and Riverside counties, you know, we don't have the best air quality. So having oaks and other trees around is really a benefit to us. Plus they're beautiful, they provide us shade. There's just so many benefits of oaks. But nature also depends on us to be good stewards. So oaks at Cienega Canyon are suffering from a variety of threats, and actually oaks across the state, not just Cienega Canyon. There are many insect pests that can harm and kill oak trees. These pests can make the trees more vulnerable to infection by various fungal and bacterial species that can cause a sudden oak death or bot canker disease. So, you know, Western oak bark beetle is on the property. It's known to have helped introduce some of these fungal pathogens. We do not currently have the gold-spotted oak borer, or GSOB, on the property, but it's only like 10 miles away, so it's probably only a matter of time. And GSOBs can take out whole woodlands. So you may have heard the term burn it where you buy it. I'm an avid camper, and so this is something that you should practice, is not transporting firewood, because some of these insects can hitch a ride, and then you end up bringing inadvertently insects to woodlands that are not infected and causing issues. So burn it where you buy it. These two trees here are actually trees on the preserve that have died. Oaks face a variety of issues. It's not necessarily one thing that kills them. There's problem with invasive species, invasive grasses. So like, if you've ever gotten stickers in your socks or your shoes, so annoying, but those are grass seeds. And as you can see in the understory here, there's just green grasses, and the preserve used to be farmed and grazed. And so we have a lot of invasive grasses and other annuals that simply grow fast. And so they really outcompete those little seedlings for water and nutrients and sunlight. And so that's why we're stepping in, because our oak woodlands are not regenerating on their own. So we're not finding that a lot of new seedlings. And so it needs our help. Oh, and also loss of habitat is a big issue as well from urbanization. And so how are we restoring oaks? Oh, how we are restoring oaks. So it's a pretty easy process, actually. keeping them alive is kind of the hard part, especially in these hot summers. But step one is collecting the acorns. So we have volunteers help us collect acorns each year. It's super fun. It's super easy. As you can see in this photo, we collect acorns directly from the tree, and they're usually like greenish. They're still kind of green, and we know they're ready when you can easily twist off the acorn from its cap. And it's not only community volunteers that help us, we also have help from our Acorns to Oaks students. So we run a small environmental education program with Banning High School, and we bring 9th grade biology students out to the preserve on 2 field trips. During the first field trip, they collect acorns, and then they take them back to class and they germinate them and they grow them, and then they return to the preserve on a second field trip and they plant them. So they play a very important role in our oak restoration efforts, and we hope that we will have a lasting impact on them as well, and that they'll continue to be lifelong stewards of our open space. And one critter that I've got to call out here is the acorn weevil. It's one of the cutest beetles, I think, ever. And they actually lay their eggs inside of acorns. They drill holes through it and lay their eggs in it, and their larvae will eat the acorn. It's part of the natural food web, but when we're collecting acorns, we want to make sure that we're not collecting from the ground. Often those will have already been compromised in some way, and often when we're actually going to germinate the acorns, we find a lot of grubs, larvae from the acorn weevils in our trays when we're germinating. So they're an important part of the food web, but we do want to kind of avoid those acorns that have been compromised. And so our next step is to germinate the acorns. But before we germinate them, we have to do a float test. So I want you to think during the float test, basically what we do is we place the acorns in like a 5-gallon bucket of water, and some of them float and some of them sink. So I want you to think to yourself, which ones would we want to try to germinate, the floaters or the sinkers? Got it in your mind? All right, so we want to plant the sinkers, actually. So if you pick sinkers, you're right. And what we do, we pick the sinkers because typically they haven't been eaten yet. They're maybe not rotten. Sometimes acorns that have been compromised, you know, they're not whole, right? They've been eaten, so they have air in them, and so they float. And so once we know we have the good sinkers, we germinate them on a bed of vermiculite, which is a mineral. It's almost got the consistency of styrofoam, but when you get it wet, it holds a ton of water. So it's a great way to germinate them, but you could use sand or soil at home. And so right here, we can see the first formed root. It comes right out of the side of the acorn. We place them on their sides and it comes out of the pointy part. And that first formed root is called the radicle. And we think it's pretty radical because you can actually see them germinating before your eyes. It's one of the, we usually keep them in our office, and it's really fun to check on them each day and see if they're growing. And if we let it grow a little bit longer, you'll see the first stem or first shoot come out of that acorn as well. And here we have some pictures with our students where we're planting germinated acorns. So here you can see one of the shoots coming out of that acorn, and one that's a little bit further along. And more plants that our students have grown and brought back to the preserve. And so we like to do the germination test and plant germinated acorns because we know we're planting a viable acorn. It takes a little bit of work to actually do a planting site and dig out the soil, so we want to make sure that our efforts are fruitful. So the next step, which you may have guessed, is to plant seedlings. So we have some of our young volunteers often come out and join us for planting events. Here we have some more students with Acorns to Oaks and volunteers of all ages that come out to help. And you can see when we do the planting, we typically shovel out a few inches of soil, about 3 feet by 3 feet. We create a little basin that kind of helps bring more water to the oak because we don't have irrigation out here. So rainfall is really important to establishing oaks. And we also try to give them their best chance at survival. So with that, we plant them with a cylindrical screen that we bury about 6 inches in the soil. And so it's like protective cage for our acorns so that those soil dwelling animals like squirrels don't eat our acorns, and so that the browsing animals like deer don't eat the leaves when they start to grow. And each planting site also gets a flag and a tag, which tells us which year we planted it and which number of oak it is. We might have, you know, up to 90 planting sites a year, and so that's how we track survival. And we also will put a weed mat down to reduce the growth of weeds, which tend to outcompete the acorns, and or we mulch. And this last year we actually did it, sprayed the surrounding soil with an herbicide to reduce the weed growth, and we believe that that had a really big impact on survivorship, along with the week of rain we got in April, which was great. It's a lot of rain late in the season also was very helpful. And oaks tend to live near the bottom of hills and valleys, on gentle slopes and in canyons. And so early on, we maybe weren't planting some of our oaks in the best site for survival. So we've gotten a little more savvy of where we're planting them. You know, they like a certain microclimate. They like to be kind of at the edge of the slope or into the slope, bottom of the hill, and they like to be on more northern facing slopes. So if you're thinking to yourself, I really want to plant an oak, maybe in my yard, I can give you some advice. I have never planted an oak in a yard before to know how it exactly would act, but I do know that they like well drained soils, loamy soils. They need a lot of space, and it's helpful if you plant them somewhere where they might get some runoff from rainfall, but where water won't just sit. They don't like their roots wet. They can develop root rot, so that's important. And you'll want to plant them in the winter to take advantage of the rainfall. And one more thing is they will need summer watering for the first few years of growth. And we have some really hardy college students and other volunteers that help us with the summer watering. Our staff actually was just out there today in the triple-digit heat doing watering. I see Dennis shaking his head. Yeah, it's pretty brutal, but important if we want them to survive. Remember, I said the hard part's keeping them alive. And so, again, they do need a little bit of water during the first few years of growth. And it's too challenging to get irrigation way out in the preserve. And so we try to water them several times during each summer to give them a little bit more fighting chance. So we carry gallon jugs out there and we give each little seedling a gallon of water. And here's some pictures of some of our seedlings that are growing. This is Rolly, one of our awesome volunteers that helps out a lot. And here's some more larger seedlings. So this one's overgrowing its cage, so we'll open them up, but then when they get to be too big, we'll just remove the cage so that we don't restrict their growth. So this guy here is about 2 feet, 3 feet tall now, and so it's ready to be on its own, but we still try to give those water. And then here we have some that are maybe, 3 inches tall. So again, it's important to give them that summer water to keep them alive. So you may be thinking, wow, this sounds awesome. I really want to help restore oaks. And we want you to help us too. We would certainly love for you to come out and volunteer with us. We usually collect acorns in October, and then we come back and plant our germinated acorns in January. And we do that every year. So even if we're not able to carry out with the public this year, we will definitely be doing it next year. So we would love for you to come join us. And you could even water if you want a good workout and a good sweat. We definitely welcome people helping us water. You could also share this information with others, like your friends and family. Let them know who Rivers and Lands Conservancy is and what we're doing. You could also become a member or even donate. So I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our wonderful grantors. Again, the Inland Empire Resource Conservation District is fantastic. They've provided us funding and support for this program for many years. And if you haven't checked out the Inland Empire RCD, check them out. They're doing fantastic work in the San Bernardino and Riverside areas. They do a lot of stuff for students in class, and they're getting more involved in local agriculture. So they're just a great organization. Can't sing their praises enough. Another organization that's been crucial is Edison International. They've been very supportive of our programs on the property for many years. And most recently, the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians has also supported our program. And last but not least, thanks again to Wicks Brewing for sponsoring our happy hour. And so please check out our website, follow us on Facebook or Instagram, and thank you for attending. Let us know if you have any questions. Let me stop the screen share.
That was awesome. Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for letting me talk.
We had a question from Mary about the time of year that we do the planting. I think that you covered that. Mary, let us know if you have any additional questions on the timing for the restoration.
Yeah, we like to take advantage as much as we can with just natural precipitation. So usually we don't get a ton of rain before January, but so we try to plant in early January, take advantage of the rainfall.
Awesome. Madeline says, how fast do the trees grow?
You know, some of them not super fast, and some that are just planted like where they want to be. And I've seen them grow like several feet in a year or 2 years. So I don't have a firm grasp on that. You know, I think they go relatively fast if they're happy.
Yeah, probably depends on multiple environmental factors. I think that Ryan jumped on late, although I don't see him here anymore. I was going to see if he had more to add on that, but I don't see him. Let's see. Oops, one of my questions jumped up here. Tim says, are there any bird species restricted to live oaks?
I don't know if there's any that are like only rely on live oaks. I know there's several that heavily rely on oaks, like of course the acorn woodpecker, the scrub jay. There's oak titmouse, but I'm not sure. I don't know that answer.
That's a good one. Maybe we can look into that and follow up on it. Astrid says, where else are the coast live oaks endemic to?
So they occur close to the coast, you know, within 60 miles of the coast, basically from Mendocino County, so north of Sacramento, all the way down to northern Baja California. And the oaks at Cienega Canyon Preserve are about almost 60 miles inland. So they're right about at the edge of where oaks occur in our area.
That's a good question. Nanette says, have any of your oak babies started having acorns yet? I love that question.
No, that's a great question. I was actually thinking about that when I was putting the presentation together, like when are we going to get acorns? Not that I know of, unless Dennis, did you see any out there while you're monitoring today? I don't think they're ready yet. No, he's shaking his head no. Nanette actually joined us on like one of the first acorn planting events I ever held. So she, there was a picture of you in the presentation. Did you see it? Thanks, Nanette.
So kind of following up on that, Nicole, what was the very first year that Rivers and Lands Conservancy did a planting in Cienega to give a gauge for how old the oldest oak baby could be at this point?
Sure. We really started doubling down on our efforts in, I would say, January 2014. So 6 years. Early on, we didn't have a ton of success with survival. We kind of learned as we went along. So, I would say there's not a ton of early plants that survived. It was a little bit of a learning process in the beginning, although we do have some. I can think of a couple that I know that are about 6 years old now. And then this year, since we've tried some new techniques, we're definitely doing a better job at planting them where they want to be planted. Even through this harsh summer, we've got about 85% survival, which is really good. So we're feeling good about that and hoping that we can continue keeping them going.
Yeah, way to go, land stewards. This year is awesome with them, right, for sure. Michelle, our wonderful board president, wants to let everybody know that she and her wife actually placed a geocache at Cienega Canyon. So if anybody's interested in geocaching and exploring Cienega Canyon in that way, it's a really cool opportunity. And Jack, our executive director, says, how many seedlings in total has RLC planted?
And Jack, why you gotta ask that question? Because I don't have an answer. I knew somebody was gonna ask it, but I didn't know it'd be you. No, I don't know. Well, Jack's giving me a surprised look, but when he did the program, I think they like shotgun planted like hundreds of acorns. But geez, I would say somewhere at least 500 planting sites.
I was going to say if we averaged at least 90 planting sites over 6 years, that's 540 and perhaps more if there was that shotgun approach. So maybe between 500 and, I don't know, 500 and 800 ish is a good guess.
Yeah, and I think we're not planting nearly as much maybe every year, but being a little bit more strategic about how we're doing it.
Sure. Astrid asks, what's the typical lifespan of the oak tree?
So they can live up to around 250 years. Some live older. So they're not super duper long lived, but they do live a couple hundred years.
Yeah, under the right conditions.
Yeah.
And Nanette is sharing that when she was doing restoration, she had some oak babies that were producing acorns at 8 years, which is super exciting because that could be around the corner for some of ours.
Yeah, I can't wait. I think it will be really exciting.
I know. We'll have to have a party when that comes. Tim says, are you raising funds specifically for a stewardship endowment for this property?
Yes. I mean, no, we want to. We haven't gotten there yet. I will say that that is something that is pretty high on our list. As I mentioned, it's really one of our favorite properties. It's one that we can bring the public on, and we just, it's a wonderful resource for people that live nearby. So yeah, that's something that's on our high on our wish list, and we're hoping to start something soon. Rebecca, do you have anything to add, Miss Development Director? She can't unmute herself.
I would just add that, and anyone who does, want to donate is always welcome to restrict their gift to Cienega Canyon to help with the work that we're currently doing. we're on the verge of doing strategic planning right now, and I have no doubt that an endowment for Cienega is on the list. And you know, keep your eye on us, because we will be doing more things there in the future as we get going too. There's a lot of possibilities for that property, and we're not going to be able to do it without the help of the community. So
Well said.
Thank you, Rebecca. Our friend Sherry says that she was delighted to learn recently that the California sister butterfly larvae survive only on California oaks, and she thinks that this would include coastal live oaks, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I read that, and I don't think it's specific to coast live oaks, but that the California oaks have like something like 5 butterfly species that what's the word? Rely on the oak in order to complete their life cycle. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. David asks you if there's a difference in survivorship for locally / not locally collected acorns.
That's a great question. And that's not one that we can answer. We do try to collect locally from the preserve, definitely. And then in years where we've found that our preserve oaks just didn't provide any acorns, we've gone nearby areas and collected acorns to germinate. Typically, that's what you want to do for restoration, because those oaks from that area will be most well adapted for the environmental conditions of the site. So we haven't done that, but there may be a time where we want to try to, introduce a little variability in our oaks. Might prove that maybe some oaks from somewhere else might be a little more resistant to some of the diseases. I don't know, but it's a good question.
That is a good question. We've got really good questions tonight. Tim says, will climate change your focus on replanting? That's a loaded question.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, certainly if it keeps getting drier there, we'll have to be a little more strategic about where we're planting, plant them in areas maybe where we know there's a little bit larger watershed. They'll get a little bit more runoff. That's not something that we've given a lot of thought on. It's looming though, right? It's scary. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, definitely something to think about as we move forward. Mike asks, in addition to planting oaks, are there any other plans for Cienega Canyon?
Yes, tons. As I mentioned, it was formerly in agriculture and grazing, and so we have a lot of weeds on the property that we would love to restore back to native habitat. We do have some active smaller projects on the preserve where we're doing creek restoration, and so we've removed a lot of invasives there, and we're doing planting, and we're doing that with volunteers as well. And so that's something that we hope to continue over the years and grow. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested in getting involved. We've done some shrub restoration too. So yeah, we'd like to transform the whole site, right? If we only had a few $1 million, we could, but we're doing it in little bite-sized pieces now with the funding and support that we have. And maybe one day we'll find some other significant funding sources to be able to restore larger tracts. But yep, little by little.
Little by little, for sure. Astrid says, I can't remember if you mentioned this already, but how did this restoration project get started?
Maybe that's a question for Jack. I think we had a member on the board that was a researcher at UC Riverside studying oaks. So I think he had a role in identifying that. We had researchers go onto our property around 2010 and identify some pests that our oaks were infected with, the western oak bark beetle, but also some of the fungal pests. And also I think Jack started tracking and noticing that our trees were dying. So Jack, I see you took yourself off mute. Please chime in.
That's all correct. That we saw oak mortality on the site from a number of causes: the drought, infestation of fungus, western oak bark beetle, and we thought that an acorn collection and planting event would be a good volunteer event, and we had a lot of positive response to it. And so we tried it that first year, and Nicole came on the staff soon after and really stepped up our efforts to improve our success, and we've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, and the land stewards have stepped up even more, and it keeps being refined and improved. Team effort.
And I'd add one thing to Mike's question about other plans and what Nicole mentioned about creek restoration. We're also facing Cienega almost being loved to death. There's houses being built in the surrounding area. There's a lot of people who use Cienega. So we're also looking at visitor management at Cienega Canyon as one of the activities that we're starting to do and want to do more of.
Thank you for chiming in, Jack. And I think we have one last question here. Do you fertilize the seedlings in the nursery?
You know, we haven't really grown much in the nursery. Typically what we do is we just germinate the acorns and then plant them directly in the ground. There are studies that show there's not a real difference, like year 2, 3 of growth between those that you plant from seedlings and those that you plant from acorns. So the seedlings that we have are typically from the classes, you know, the kids that grow them. So we don't add fertilizer, although I've seen some recommendations to add fertilizer. We find that they actually do just fine without it, but I have seen some, but we don't use it.
I lied, we have one more question for you. This is from Tim again. How long was the preserve in ag production? And do you have any photos or other info regarding historical habitats?
We do have some photos that Jack has found. Jack actually prepared a whole restoration plan for the whole canyon, San Timoteo Canyon, so he can probably speak to this better than I can. I think from the late 1800s to the 1950s, but could be longer than that for how long it's been was in agricultural use. There was also a commercial nursery on the property in more recent years, and then we got our hands on it.
And yes, Astrid, do you want me to unmute you or can you do it? There you go.
All right, thanks, Rachel. Thank you, Nicole, too. That was a really informative presentation. I really enjoyed it. And then kind of like, since Jack mentioned there was a lot of visitors, have you guys heard of the Adopt a Tree that the Angeles National Forest, they like recently started an Adopt a Tree little program where people like can adopt a tree and then when they're hiking, they can go water it. So I'm wondering if like, maybe
we
RLC.
definitely need that, right, staff, stewardship staff? That would be cool. There's a lot of people that live next door already, right? There's that whole housing development, and it's almost gonna be surrounded by houses. So that's a great idea. We'll look into that.
Yeah, I think that'd be really awesome because then people will be like, I need to go water my oak tree I adopted.
Yeah. I know we have had some hardcore volunteers that have told us like, yeah, we went and checked on our oak and we gave it some water like over the summer. So I know people are willing to do it. They just need to get involved, right? And in some direction. So that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, maybe we could have different tags. You know, we can have the official ones, 2020 number 52, and then it could say Astrid's oak on it,
Yeah.
or you know, something like that. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. Like I just saw it on Facebook, I think like a month or two ago, like the beginning of the summer, the Angeles National Forest, they like had like a really cool flyer, like, oh, adopt a tree, and then like, you know, contact us. So I thought that was like a really cool idea.
Yeah, That is super cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and thank you guys again for having this virtual meeting.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Yeah, you're an awesome volunteer.
Oh, thanks. I miss you guys.
We miss you too. Nicole, there's a comment from Adrienne Ortega. She says she lives next door and that she thinks the community would like to be more involved, but many do not really know that it exists as a managed property. I don't know if you have any comments on that. I asked Adrienne to unmute herself if she wants to add anything to that comment or elaborate on any level. We'd be happy to hear those thoughts.
Great. Yeah. Adrian, that's actually something we've been talking about on staff as well, as getting our neighbors more involved. There's been some communication in the past with the HOA because we really feel like that's probably the best way to disperse information. But I know Rebecca's also has it on her list to write a letter to those residents living out there. Actually, we're going to invite people to our events this fall, which we don't know if we can invite people to, but yes, we that is on our to-do list and something that we realize we need to do a better job at as well. So thank you. Have you ever been out to one of our events? We'd love to have you sign up for our newsletter if you haven't, so you know when they're happening.
All right, I think that sums up all the Q&A from the chat box, Nicole.
Great, what a fun way to end the work week. So thank you guys for hanging out with us and for all the wonderful questions.
Agreed. Thank you, everybody. Hope everybody has a good rest of their evening, and we'll look forward to maybe seeing you at a future virtual event, hopefully an in-person event soon as well.